Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Relaxing. Tonight we are walking straight into a medieval winter campaign, the kind where your breath fogs, instantly your boots crunch on frozen ground, and the cold feels less like weather and more like an enemy that has already decided it does not like you. You're not easing into this gently. You're already out here standing in the dark, realizing very quickly that you probably will not survive this if you were dropped into it unprepared. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you are awake enough, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights. You step forward and the ground answers with a dull frozen sound like the earth itself is tired. It is winter in the Middle Ages, and you are a soldier on campaign, not tucked safely behind stone walls, not sitting by a hearth, but moving, camping, waiting, surviving. There is no dramatic battle at this moment, no heroic charge, just cold, deep persistent cold that works its way through leather, wool and bone. One mainstream historical fact is simple and unpleasant. Medieval armies did fight and march in winter more often than popular movies suggest. Campaigns did not politely stop when snow fell. Kings still needed territory lords, still enforced claims, and soldiers still followed orders even when rivers froze and daylight shrank. Historians still argue whether winter campaigns were strategic necessities or simply poor planning driven by political pressure rather than military sense. You feel that pressure now. You're not here because it is smart. You are here because someone higher up decided the war could not wait for spring. The air smells sharp and clean at first, almost refreshing, until it burns the inside of your nose. Each breath feels like it scrapes something raw. Around you other men shift their weight, cough softly, mutter complaints that disappear into the night. Nobody wants to waste warmth on long conversations. Words feel expensive out here. There is a strange quiet to winter that presses down on you. Snow absorbs sound. Even a large group of soldiers seems muted, like the world has been wrapped in thick cloth. Somewhere in the distance, a horse stamps and snorts the sound loud in the stillness. You notice how everyone instinctively stays close together, not for friendship, but because isolation feels dangerous. A quirky but very real tidbit is that some medieval soldiers believed winter cold was caused by malevolent forces lingering in the air. Not demons exactly, but unhealthy influences that could seep into the body. Cold was not just uncomfortable, it was thought to be actively harmful in a moral and physical sense. Letting yourself get too cold felt almost like negligence, as if you had failed to guard your own body. You pull your cloak tighter. It does not do much, but the motion itself is comforting. Layers matter, but so does habit. The repetition of small actions helps you feel in control even when you are not. You quickly realize that surviving the night is the real challenge. Daylight offers movement. Marching warms you even if it exhausts you. Night takes that away. Darkness means stopping, and stopping means the cold creeps in without resistance. Medieval soldiers feared night and winter more than enemy attacks. You can fight a man, you cannot wrestle frost. The ground beneath your boots is uneven, hard and unforgiving. No tents yet, no beds, just earth that feels like stone. You try not to think about how long it has been since this soil felt sunlight. Your toes already ache a deep, dull ache that warns you this is only the beginning. You notice how the cold changes your thinking, everything narrows. Long-term plans fade, glory fades. Even fear becomes quiet and practical. Your world reduces to simple goals: stay warm, stay awake, stay alive until morning. Historians still debate how mentally prepared medieval soldiers were for these conditions. Some argue that people of the Middle Ages were more accustomed to hardship, and therefore less bothered by cold. Others suggest that familiarity did not equal comfort, and that winter suffering was just as miserable then as it would be now, perhaps worse, because expectations were lower and remedies fewer. You glance at the men around you. Some are veterans, faces lined and expressions flat. They know what is coming. Others are younger eyes, darting, shifting too much, wasting energy. Everyone learns quickly out here. There is also the quiet knowledge that winter kills without leaving heroic stories behind. No songs are written about freezing slowly in a field. No tapestries show soldiers shivering through endless nights. Yet winter campaigns thinned armies just as effectively as battles. Cold led to sickness, frostbite, desertion and death that never made it into official records. You feel the first real shiver run through you, not dramatic, just persistent. It starts between your shoulders and spreads. You try stamping your feet. It helps for a moment. Movement is life. The sky above is clear stars, sharp and indifferent. You imagine how beautiful this night would be if you were somewhere else wrapped in blankets, listening to wind instead of enduring it. That thought fades quickly. Dwelling on comfort makes the present worse. Somewhere nearby a commander calls out short instructions. Voices carry strangely and the cold sounding flatter, sharper. Fires will be lit soon, you're told. Not yet. Discipline matters. Smoke can give away position. Survival is always balanced against strategy. You begin to understand that medieval soldiers survived winter, not through one clever trick, but through endurance layered on endurance. Habit, community, small comforts, constant adaptation. There is no single solution waiting ahead, just a long night and many more after it. And as you stand there, shifting your weight breath, rising in pale clouds, you feel the campaign truly begin. Not with trumpets or banners, but with the quiet agreement that you will keep going one frozen step at a time. You're still standing in the cold, and now you start paying closer attention to what is actually between your skin and the night air. Clothing becomes a kind of armor long before you ever think about metal. Medieval soldiers did not have modern insulation, but they understood layers in a practical, lived way. You feel the roughness of linen against your skin, the scratch of wool on top of it, and the weight of everything pressing down on your shoulders. One mainstream historical fact is that linen undergarments were standard for most medieval European soldiers. Linen absorbed sweat, which mattered even in winter, because moisture trapped against the skin could chill you faster than dry cold. Over that came wool prized not for softness, but for its ability to retain warmth even when damp. Historians still argue whether medieval people fully understood why wool worked so well, or simply relied on generations of experience telling them it did. You tug at your tunic. It smells faintly of smoke-old sweat and whatever it last brushed against. Cleanliness is a luxury you left behind days ago. The cloak around you is heavy and uneven, thicker in some places than others, patched and reworked many times. This is not tailored elegance. This is survival fabric. A quirky detail often overlooked is that colour mattered more than fashion in winter campaigns. Darker wool was preferred because it showed less dirt and absorbed slightly more warmth from weak winter sunlight. Some soldiers even believed darker colours actively drew heat into the body. It is not scientific, but when you are cold enough, belief itself can feel warming. You notice your hands. Gloves are rare, mittens even rarer. Fingers stiffen, quickly becoming clumsy. Tasks that feel simple in summer now take effort and patience. Tying a strap, adjusting a buckle, scratching an itch through layers of fabric. Everything slows down. Boots are another quiet misery. Leather soles harden in the cold, losing flexibility. Straw or cloth stuffing helps a little, but once wet it freezes into uncomfortable lumps. There is an ongoing scholarly debate about how widespread foot wrappings were among medieval soldiers. Some evidence suggests they were common, others that they were an improvisation rather than standard issue. You shift your weight again, feeling how the cold seeps upward from the ground through your boots into your legs. No matter how many layers you wear on your torso, the earth finds a way in. Armour, if you have it, adds another complication. Chainmail drapes coldly over your shoulders, each metal ring stealing heat from your body. Plate armor is worse. It turns you into a walking heat sink. There is a persistent myth that soldiers wore armor constantly. In winter camps, many removed as much metal as possible when not expecting immediate combat despite the risk. Warmth often mattered more than readiness. You pull your cloak tighter, overlapping it across your chest. There is a particular way soldiers learn to wrap themselves, minimizing gaps where wind sneaks in. These small techniques are passed down quietly, learned by watching rather than teaching. Nobody gives a lecture on staying warm. You just copy what works. Historians still debate how much variation there was between armies. Wealthier troops clearly had better clothing. Mercenaries often invested heavily in gear because their lives depended on it. Poor levies suffered the most, sometimes wrapped in mismatched layers that offered little real protection. The cold forces you into constant awareness of your body. You notice when your shoulders tense, when your jaw clenches, when your teeth chatter despite your efforts to stop it. Each shiver wastes energy, but suppressing it takes focus. You choose your battles carefully. You hear someone nearby complaining about numb toes. Another laughs softly, the sound brittle. Humour survives, but it is quieter in winter. Short remarks, dry sarcasm. Nobody has energy for grand stories yet. There is also the smell of wet wool everywhere. It is heavy animal and faintly sour. In summer it is unpleasant. In winter it becomes oddly reassuring. It means warmth is nearby even if it is not enough. A lesser-known fact is that some soldiers stuffed spare cloth, even hay, under their clothing for extra insulation during long halts. It was uncomfortable and bulky, but it trapped air, which trapped heat. Comfort was always secondary to function. You realize now that medieval winter survival started with accepting discomfort as normal. There is no moment where you feel truly warm. There are only moments where you feel less cold. That becomes the goal. Manageable misery. As the camp begins to organize itself, you sense that clothing is just the first layer of defense. Fires will come, shared spaces, food, routine. All of it builds slowly, piece by piece, against the night. You glance at the dark horizon again. The cold is not easing. It is settling, impatient, confident, and wrapped in your layers of linen and wool, you prepare to test whether they will be enough. You are guided forward as the camp finally begins to take shape, and the light fades in that slow, deliberate way that makes winter evenings feel longer than they are. This is the hour when everything changes. During the day, movement kept you warm enough. At night, stillness takes over and the cold becomes personal. You learn quickly that where you stop matters almost as much as what you wear. One solid historical fact is that medieval camps were rarely laid out randomly even in winter. Commanders chose sites with wind protection whenever possible, such as shallow valleys, tree lines, or the leeward side of a hill. Historians still argue whether these choices were based on formal military theory or simple hard-earned experience passed down over generations. You are steered toward a cluster of bodies rather than an open space. This is not about friendliness. It is about survival. The air here feels slightly less sharp, disturbed by movement held by shared warmth. You notice how instinctively everyone avoids the ridges and open ground where wind cuts hardest. The ground is trampled snow and frozen mud churned into uneven ridges by boots and hooves. You test a spot with your foot before committing to it. There is no soft place, just less bad ones. Somewhere close someone mutters about rocks pressing into their back already, hours before sleep is even possible. A quirky but documented detail is that medieval soldiers often oriented themselves with their feet toward fires and heads away from prevailing winds. This simple positioning could mean the difference between waking with feeling in your toes or not. It was knowledge learned painfully and remembered well. You lower yourself down, carefully knees stiff, joints complaining. The cold radiates upward immediately, like the ground is eager to reclaim whatever warmth you have left. You pull your cloak beneath you, sacrificing its coverage to create a thin barrier. It helps a little, not much. Around you the camp is alive with small sounds, the scrape of flint, the low murmur of voices, the occasional sharp crack as frozen wood snaps when handled. Smoke begins to curl upward, thick and stinging. It clings to clothing, hair, skin. You breathe it in and cough quietly, but you do not move away. Smoke is unpleasant, but it means fire. Historians still debate how many soldiers had access to tents during winter campaigns. Evidence suggests tents were limited and prioritized for officers or specialized troops. Most common soldiers slept in the open using cloaks and makeshift shelters. Comfort was not part of the calculation. You watch as a small fire catches flames licking upward uncertainly. For a moment the light feels almost magical, faces emerging from the dark, hands stretching out eagerly. The fire crackles, pops and settles into a steady glow. You inch closer, feeling heat on your shins while your back remains painfully cold. This uneven warmth becomes familiar. One side of you almost comfortable, the other side numb. You rotate slowly like food over a spit, trying to balance the sensation. Everyone does the same. It looks faintly ridiculous if you stop to think about it. A lesser-known practice involved soldiers banking fires with earth or ash to keep embers alive through the night. This allowed fires to be revived quickly without starting from scratch, saving effort and preserving a precious source of heat. It was a small mercy in long nights. The camp smells are complex and heavy. Smoke, wet wool, leather, animals, old food. Human bodies that have not been properly washed in weeks. In summer it would be overwhelming. In winter the cold dulls it slightly, wrapping everything in a muted haze. You listen to the quiet conversations around you. Complaints about cold hands, jokes about frozen beards. Someone mentions a past winter worse than this one, as if ranking suffering makes it easier. There is comfort in shared misery. It reminds you that you are not alone. As darkness fully settles, the sky becomes a deep, clear black star, sharp and cold. There is beauty here even now, though you have little energy to appreciate it. The firelight flickers against faces, turning them into moving shadows. This is where you will spend the night. Historians still argue whether winter camps were more dangerous from enemy attack or from disease and exposure. Many records suggest cold-related illness killed more soldiers than combat during prolonged winter campaigns. The enemy did not need to strike. The night itself did the work. You adjust your position again, trying to shield yourself from a faint breeze that slips through gaps between bodies. Someone shifts, mutters an apology. Space is shared and contested quietly. You realize that sunset in a medieval winter camp is not an ending. It's the start of the hardest part of the day, and as the fire settles into a steady burn, you brace yourself, knowing that surviving the night will be an act of patience rather than strength. The fire is finally steady now, no longer flickering nervously, but breathing in a slow, rhythmic way that feels almost alive. You sit close enough to feel heat soak into your shins, close enough that your face warms while the rest of you remains stubbornly cold. It is comforting but also deceptive. You already sense that this warmth is shallow, temporary and not to be trusted. One well-recorded reality of medieval winter camps is that fires were essential but inefficient. They burned wood, quickly demanded constant attention, and warmed only what faced them directly. Unlike enclosed hearths, open fires bled heat upward into the night sky. You feel that lost yourself as warmth brushes your skin, then vanishes as soon as you shift. You hold your hands out, fingers spread, chasing sensation. Pins and needles sting as blood creeps back. It almost hurts more than the numbness, but you welcome it anyway. Pain means life. Around you, others do the same, hands hovering, bodies angled awkwardly. No one gets comfortable. Comfort is not part of the deal. Smoke drifts low, pushed downward by the cold air. It burns your eyes and coats your throat. You cough softly, turning your head away, then back again. Smoke is unpleasant, but it keeps insects away and preserves meat and clothing. In winter, it does something else too. It reminds you that the fire is still alive. A lesser known but documented practice involves soldiers sleeping close enough to the fire to scorch the outer layers of their cloaks. Burn marks were common and accepted. Better damaged fabric than frostbitten skin. The smell of singed wool becomes part of the camp, sharp and oddly reassuring. You notice how the fire changes the mood. Faces soften, shoulders lower. Conversations pick up slightly, though they remain quiet. Someone tells a short story about a warmer campaign exaggerating the sun and downplaying the misery. Laughter follows brief and controlled, as if joy itself must be rationed. There is no full agreement among modern historians about how strictly fires were regulated at night. Some sources suggest tight control to avoid revealing positions, while others indicate that warmth often took priority once darkness fell. Standing here, you suspect the truth depended heavily on circumstances and commanders. The fire pops suddenly, sending sparks upward. You flinch without meaning to. Everything feels heightened in the cold. Sounds carry differently. Light seems sharper. Even shadows feel more solid. You rotate again, presenting your back to the fire now, letting heat sink into muscles that have been clenched all day. Your front cools quickly, but you accept it. Balance is constant work here. Too close, and you risk burns. Too far, and the cold creeps back in, slow and relentless. Someone nearby feeds the fire, carefully placing wood just so. Dry wood is precious. Damp logs hiss and steam wasting effort. You learn to tell the difference by sound alone. Crackling is good, sizzling is not. An unusual belief recorded in some medieval sources held that fire had a purifying quality beyond warmth. Sitting near flames was thought to drive illness out of the body. Whether or not anyone truly believed it in a scholarly sense, the ritual of gathering around fire carried a psychological comfort that mattered deeply. Your clothes begin to dry slightly, but this creates another problem. As moisture evaporates, it steals heat from your body. You shiver despite the fire teeth clicking softly. Drying too fast can feel colder than staying damp. Everything is a trade-off. You glance beyond the circle of light. Darkness presses in thick and complete. The fire creates a small island of visibility, and everything beyond it feels unreal, distant, hostile. You understand now why night watches exist, not just for enemies but to guard against the creeping sense that the world has narrowed to this one fragile glow. Records from winter campaigns show that fires were also gathering points for information. Orders passed quietly. Rumours spread. News travelled faster in warmth than in cold. You overhear fragments now. Talk of tomorrow's march, of frozen rivers, of supplies running low. You think about how dependent you are on this flame. Without it, the night would feel endless. With it, the night becomes manageable, divided into rotation shifts, small stretches of endurance. The fire burns lower as fuel thins. Someone stirs it again, coaxing embers back to life. The glow brightens briefly, then settles. You know this rhythm will repeat all night. Wake, tend fire, rotate, doze, shiver, repeat. As time stretches, you stop expecting the fire to truly warm you. Instead, you accept it as a companion, a signal that you're not alone in the dark. It does not defeat the cold. It negotiates with it. And as you sit there letting heat touch you and leave you again, you understand that medieval soldiers survived winter nights, not by conquering the cold, but by managing it one flickering moment at a time. The fire settles into a low, steady glow, and sooner or later you have to face the next reality. Sleep, or something like it. No one announces this moment. It arrives quietly when movement slows and conversations fade into murmurs. Your body is exhausted, but the ground beneath you feels impossibly hard, as if it has no interest in cooperating. You lower yourself, carefully easing down in stages, joints stiff and uncooperative. The earth is frozen solid, and it presses back immediately. There is no give, no softness. You arrange your cloak beneath you again, folding it over itself, trying to create a barrier that barely exists. This is what passes for bedding. Surviving accounts from medieval campaigns make it clear that most soldiers slept directly on the ground, often without tents or raised platforms. Straw, when available, was a luxury, not a standard. Many nights offered nothing but frozen soil and whatever fabric you carried with you. Comfort was never the expectation. You lie on your side at first, then shift to your back, then back again. Every position reveals a new pressure point. Your hip begins to ache. Your shoulder protests. The cold pushes upward relentlessly, and you become aware of how quickly warmth drains away when you stop moving. An often overlooked detail is that soldiers frequently slept fully clothed, including boots, belts, and sometimes even helmets nearby. Removing clothing risked losing heat, and made waking in a hurry difficult. Sleep was shallow and conditional, always ready to break. You pull your knees slightly toward your chest, instinctively curling inward. It is not graceful, but it reduces surface area exposed to the cold. Around you, bodies arrange themselves in similar shapes, forming a loose pattern of human bundles scattered around the fire. There is ongoing disagreement among scholars about how much actual sleep medieval soldiers got during winter campaigns. Some argue that exhaustion guaranteed rest despite discomfort. Others believe sleep deprivation was common, contributing to accidents, illness, and lowered morale. Lying here, you suspect the truth lies somewhere between, with sleep arriving in fragments rather than full stretches. Your breath fogs the air just inches from your face. You become oddly fixated on it, watching it rise and vanish. Counting breaths becomes a way to pass time. Inhale, exhale, slow, steady. The cold makes everything feel quieter, heavier. Nearby, someone snores softly, then stops abruptly, waking themselves. Another mutters in their sleep words, unintelligible. Sleep here is not private. It is shared, audible, exposed. A strange but period-accurate habit involved placing weapons under the body while sleeping. Swords or spears were laid beneath cloaks, not for comfort, but to keep them from freezing or being stolen. Metal stays slightly warmer when pressed against a living body, and that warmth mattered. Your back begins to numb and you roll again, careful not to bump into anyone. Space is limited and every movement risks waking someone else. Apologies are whispered, accepted without fuss. Everyone understands. The fire dims further. Embers glow faintly. Shadows deepen. The warmth you felt earlier has faded into memory. You tuck your chin down, trying to trap heat, and pull your cloak higher around your face. The fabric smells of smoke and old wool. It is not pleasant, but it is familiar. Your thoughts wander despite yourself. You think about home, about warmth that does not require constant attention. You think about beds and walls and silence without cold. The thoughts are dangerous. They make you notice what you lack. You push them away gently. Records from the period suggest that many soldiers used rhythmic motions to help themselves sleep. Rocking slightly, tapping fingers, quiet humming. Anything to create a sense of control. You find yourself doing the same, barely aware of it. Your muscles twitch as you drift, then snap you awake again. The ground is too hard, the cold too present. Sleep comes in thin layers, never deep enough to forget where you are. Eventually exhaustion wins small victories. Your breathing slows. Thoughts blur. The fire crackles softly, then fades into background noise. You're not warm, you're not comfortable, but you're resting, and in this place that is enough. As you slip into a shallow, fragile sleep, you understand that medieval soldiers did not conquer the night. They endured it lying on frozen earth, trusting that morning would eventually return. Sleep never lasts long before something pulls you back toward awareness. A shift of bodies, a change in the fire, a sudden bite of cold along your spine. You open your eyes to darkness broken only by embers, and you realize that being alone out here would be unbearable. Survival, at least at night, depends on closeness. You edge nearer to the others without fully waking them careful practiced. Bodies pressed together not in comfort but in agreement. Shared warmth becomes a resource quietly negotiated. Shoulders touch, backs rest against backs, legs overlap slightly. There is no embarrassment left for this. Cold strips that away quickly. One well-supported observation from medieval sources is that soldiers often slept in tight groups, during winter sometimes referred to as huddling, though the term itself is modern. This was not affection, it was strategy. Human bodies generate heat, and when layered together that heat lingers just a little longer. You feel the difference almost immediately. The air between bodies is warmer, less sharp. Your side pressed against another soldier stops aching as much. It is still cold, but not aggressively so. You let out a slow breath you didn't realize you were holding. Privacy disappears out here. Everyone smells like smoke, sweat, wool, and fatigue. It blends into one shared scent that you stop noticing after a while. Someone shifts and presses closer. Someone else murmurs in protest, then settles. Boundaries exist, but they are flexible. There is still discussion among historians about how medieval people understood personal space compared to modern expectations. Some argue that communal living made this closeness normal. Others suggest it was tolerated rather than preferred. In moments like this, preference hardly matters. A lesser-known custom involved soldiers pairing up intentionally with someone of similar size for warmth at night. Larger men gave off more heat, but also lost it faster. Smaller men benefited from proximity. These arrangements were informal shifting as needed, based more on instinct than instruction. You become acutely aware of small details. The rise and fall of another chest against your shoulder, the sound of breathing, the way warmth pools briefly before slipping away. It is oddly calming, like being part of a single, larger organism. The cold still finds gaps. Your feet ache. Your nose feels raw. Your hands tucked between bodies or under your own arms remain stiff. But the edge has softened. You are no longer fighting alone. You remember earlier thoughts of discomfort and laugh inwardly at them. Out here, dignity is optional. Warmth is not. If pressing against strangers keeps you alive, then strangers become allies by default. Period accounts hint that shared sleeping spaces also reduced fear. Night magnifies worries. Enemy attacks feel closer. Illness feels inevitable. Being surrounded by others anchors you in the present. You're part of something real, breathing alive. Someone nearby begins to snore again louder now. No one complains. The sound is reassuring. It means sleep has taken hold somewhere, even if lightly. You adjust your position, carefully fitting into the shared shape of the group. Your muscles relax a fraction. The ground still presses upward unforgiving, but your body no longer feels as exposed. A curious belief recorded in some regions suggested that sleeping alone invited sickness, while shared warmth strengthened the body against winter ailments. While not medically accurate, the idea reinforced behaviours that likely did improve survival odds. Time loses its shape. You drift in and out, awareness fading and returning without clear edges. The fire flares briefly as someone tends it, casting shifting shadows over bundled forms. Then it dims again. In this quiet closeness you realise that medieval soldiers survived cold nights not through toughness alone but through cooperation that required no words. Shared heat, shared space, shared endurance. You let your eyes close again, breathing slow and shallow, wrapped in layers of wool and humanity. The night is still long, but for now you're held within it, not facing it alone. The night stretches on, and eventually hunger becomes impossible to ignore. Cold burns calories faster than movement ever did, and your body reminds you of this with a dull, insistent ache low in your stomach. Food is no longer about pleasure. It is fuel warmth you can swallow. Someone passes along a chunk of bread hard and dense. You take it without comment, fingers stiff as you break it apart. Chewing takes effort. Your jaw works slowly, methodically. The bread tastes of grain and smoke and time. It is not fresh, but it is solid, and that matters. Surviving supply lists from medieval campaigns show that soldiers relied heavily on bread porridge and salted meat during winter. These foods travelled well and delivered energy without much preparation. Fresh produce was rare and nobody expected variety once snow closed the roads. You chew and swallow, feeling the weight settle in your stomach. Almost immediately there is a subtle change. Not warmth exactly, but the promise of it. Digestion gives your body something to work on, and that internal effort produces heat. It is one of the few reliable ways to fight the cold from the inside. A curious detail mentioned in a handful of sources is the preference for fatty cuts of meat during cold weather. Lard, bacon, and suet were prized not just for flavour, but for their perceived warming qualities. Grease left on hands was sometimes rubbed into cracked skin as a crude barrier against wind. There is still disagreement among researchers about whether medieval soldiers intentionally adjusted their diets for winter, or simply ate whatever was available. Some evidence suggests conscious choices, while other records point to necessity, rather than strategy driving winter meals. Someone nearby produces a small pot blackened from use and warms a thick stew over the embers. It smells heavy and comforting, even if you know what is in it might be questionable. A ladle makes its way around. You accept a portion without hesitation. The stew is salty, greasy, and oddly satisfying. It coats your mouth and throat, leaving a lingering warmth that spreads slowly outward. You savour it despite yourself. Moments like this feel almost luxurious, even though the conditions are anything but. Eating becomes a communal ritual. Portions are shared. Complaints are muted. No one hoards openly. Hunger and cold have a way of smoothing out selfish instincts, at least temporarily. Survival feels collective. You notice how everyone eats slowly, conserving energy. No one rushes. Fast movements invite the cold back in. You keep your bowl close to your chest, shielding it from the air letting heat rise toward your face. An unusual belief found in some medieval medical writings claimed that certain spices could counteract cold humours in the body. While spices were expensive and rare for common soldiers, even the idea of them carried psychological comfort. Warming foods were thought to restore balance. Your stomach feels heavier now, more grounded. The ache softens. You lean back slightly, careful not to spill. The fire crackles softly, embers glowing brighter as someone feeds it again. Food also brings stories, short ones. A comment about a meal eaten years ago during a worse winter. A joke about how this stew would taste better anywhere else. Laughter surfaces briefly, then fades. As the night deepens, you realize how essential these moments are. Without food, the cold would feel sharper, more personal. With it, the night becomes something you can endure rather than simply survive. You finish the last bite, slowly licking grease from your fingers without shame. Cleanliness can wait. Warmth cannot. Settling back into your place near the other's stomach, full and body marginally steadier, you feel sleep tug at you again. Not deep sleep, never that, but enough. Enough to rest. Enough to keep going. And as you close your eyes, you understand that medieval soldiers did not just eat to live. In winter, they ate to stay warm, to feel human, and to remind themselves that the night, however long, would eventually pass. The food settles heavy and reassuring, and now the drink begins to make its quiet rounds. A skin is passed from hand to hand, careful not to spill. You recognize the smell before it reaches you. Ale, thin and slightly sour, but alive with warmth. You take it gratefully, lifting it with both hands to keep from fumbling. Written accounts from medieval armies make clear that alcohol was a regular part of daily rations, especially ale and weak wine. These drinks were safer than water in many places and easier to transport than fresh supplies. In winter, they also served another purpose. They made the cold feel less sharp, at least for a while. You take a measured sip. The liquid is cool at first, then warming as it slides down your throat. It spreads through your chest and belly, loosening muscles that have been clenched for hours. Around you, others exhale softly after drinking shoulders, dropping faces easing. There is a quiet understanding here. Drink too much, and you will regret it. Alcohol dulls, awareness slows reactions and tricks the body into losing heat faster. Even medieval soldiers knew this, if only through bitter experience. Moderation is survival. An oddly specific habit appears in some campaign records. Soldiers sometimes diluted wine with warm water near the fire, creating a crude but comforting mixture. It stretched supplies and softened the drink, making it easier to consume slowly without shock to the system. You pass the skin along, wiping your mouth with the back of your hand. Your fingers feel less stiff now, though still clumsy. The warmth is gentle, temporary, and you know it will fade. Still you accept it. Small mercies matter. There remains uncertainty among modern historians about how widespread intoxication actually was during winter nights. Some argue that discipline limited excess, while others point to court records and complaints that suggest drunkenness was a recurring problem. Standing here, you sense that both are true depending on leadership and circumstance. Someone nearby chuckles softly, emboldened by a mouthful too many. The sound carries briefly, then dies. No one encourages it. Laughter is welcome, but drawing attention is not. The smell of ale mingles with smoke and wool, thickening the air. It is oddly comforting, a reminder of taverns and towns left behind. For a moment, the camp feels less temporary, less exposed. A strange belief recorded in some medieval medical traditions claimed that alcohol could chase cold spirits from the body. While the theory had no real grounding, the sensation of warmth made it feel convincing. You understand why the idea lasted. You sip again, slower this time, letting the drink linger. Your thoughts soften at the edges. Worries feel less sharp. The cold still presses in, but it no longer dominates every thought. The firelight flickers, reflecting in the eyes of those around you. Faces look calmer now, lines eased. Even the night feels slightly less hostile, though you know that is an illusion. As the skin empties, it is tucked away carefully. No one asks for more. Supplies are finite. Winter teaches restraint quickly. You settle back into your place among the others, warmth from food and drink combining briefly into something close to comfort. It will not last, you know that. But it has carried you this far. As sleep pulls at you again, you realize that medieval soldiers relied on drink not to escape the cold, but to soften its edges. Just enough warmth to rest. Just enough ease to endure. Nothing more. The warmth from food and drink fades gradually, and your awareness shifts again to what you are wearing, especially the weight that rests on your shoulders and chest. Armor. It never truly leaves your thoughts, even when you're not wearing every piece. In winter, metal feels less like protection and more like a test. Campaign inventories and visual records from the medieval period show that soldiers often kept their armor close at night, even if they did not wear it fully. Chainmail shirts might be loosened or draped nearby. Helmets were kept within reach. Readiness still mattered even when cold begged you to strip layers away. You adjust the mail at your collar, feeling how cold it is against your skin, even through layers of fabric. Metal steals heat greedily. It does not warm up easily, and when it does, it takes that warmth with it, if you move away. Wearing armor, while resting, feels like pressing yourself against winter itself. Some soldiers remove pieces carefully weighing risk against comfort. Others keep everything on trusting habit more than logic. You can see both choices around you. Someone has leaned their helmet against a pack, stuffing cloth inside to slow freezing. Another keeps theirs on chin tucked, breathing steady. There is continuing debate among military historians about how often armor was worn overnight during winter campaigns. Some argue that fear of surprise attacks kept soldiers armored at all times. Others believe exhaustion and cold forced compromises, especially during long quiet nights. Reality likely shifted from camp to camp. An unusual but documented practice involved wrapping armor in spare cloth or cloaks, when not in use, both to insulate it and to prevent frost from forming directly on the metal. It did not make armor warm, but it made it less punishing to put back on. You touch your sword hilt, feeling the leather grip stiffened by cold. Weapons suffer too, blades grow brittle, bows lose tension. Everything behaves differently in winter. Maintenance becomes a constant background task, one more thing to worry about when energy's already low. You think briefly about how armor feels in summer, heavy but familiar. In winter it feels hostile, almost alive, pulling warmth away whenever it can. Yet you know that if trouble comes, you will want it between you and danger. The firelight reflects faintly off metal surfaces, dull and muted. No bright shine. Winter steals that too. Everything looks older, rougher, more tired. Your shoulders ache under the weight and you shift again, finding a slightly better balance. Nothing is perfect. You learn to accept what is tolerable. As the night deepens, armor becomes less about fighting and more about waiting. Waiting for dawn, waiting for movement, waiting for feeling to return to your fingers and toes. You close your eyes, briefly resting with one hand still on your gear. Even in sleep you do not fully let go. In winter, campaign's armor is not just protection. It is a quiet reminder that rest is temporary and readiness never truly ends. Sometime deep in the night you wake with a quiet frustration. Your clothes are no longer just cold. They're damp, not soaked but heavy with moisture that clings stubbornly to wool and leather. Sweat from marching. Snow that melted near the fire. Breath that condensed and settled into fabric. Winter has a way of turning everything wet eventually. You shift, feeling how the fabric pulls and resists. Wet wool still holds warmth, but it feels heavier, slower, and endlessly uncomfortable. Leather stiffens as moisture freezes, creaking faintly when you move. Boots are the worst. Once damp, they become cold traps that refuse to dry. It is clear from surviving campaign descriptions that medieval soldiers rarely had the chance to properly dry their clothing during winter operations. Fires were shared, fuel was limited, and time was scarce. Dampness became a constant companion, accepted rather than solved. You inch closer to the fire, angling your boots toward the heat without burning them. Steam rises faintly, carrying a sour smell. Drying too fast risks cracking leather or shrinking wool, but leaving things wet risks worse. You balance carefully, adjusting position again and again. Someone nearby does the same, rotating boots slowly like precious objects. There is no talking. Everyone understands the routine. Dry a little, warm a little, move back before damage sets in. There is quiet uncertainty among modern researchers about how much medieval armies understood the long-term effects of moisture on health. Some evidence suggests they recognized damp clothing as dangerous, while other sources imply it was simply unavoidable and rarely discussed. A small but telling habit shows up in a few accounts. Soldiers sometimes slept with damp gloves or foot wrappings tucked against their stomachs, using body heat to dry them overnight. It was uncomfortable, but it worked better than leaving them to freeze. You considered doing the same, tucking fabric beneath your tunic. The sensation is unpleasant cold cloth pressed against warm skin, but after a while it softens. You focus on breathing, letting the warmth spread slowly. The smell of the camp shifts as more damp clothing warms, wet wool, steaming leather. Smoke thickens, catching in your throat. It is not pleasant, but it is familiar now. You flex your fingers slowly, trying to keep circulation moving. Numbness creeps in when you stop. Movement is still your ally even in rest. Somewhere in the dark a horse stamps impatiently. Animals suffer too. You think briefly about how many nights like this lie ahead, each one repeating the same small battles against cold and moisture. You adjust your cloak again, feeling how its weight has increased. Everything feels heavier in winter. Time, clothing, thoughts. As you settle back, you accept that dryness is temporary here. You aim instead for tolerable, not frozen, not soaked, just manageable. Your eyes close again, the fire crackling softly. Wet or dry, the night continues, and you continue with it, enduring in quiet, practical ways. Morning does not arrive with warmth. It arrives with movement, Someone stirs, then another, and soon the camp begins to wake in small, reluctant motions. You push yourself upright, muscles, stiff joints protesting loudly inside your body. The cold has not eased overnight. If anything, it feels sharper now, as if it has been waiting for you to stop moving again. Marching is the answer to that waiting cold. It is not a choice so much as a necessity. Standing still is punishment. Movement brings circulation, friction, heat. You stamp your feet, roll your shoulders, flex your hands, until feeling creeps back in slow waves. Accounts from winter campaigns consistently describe how armies relied on early morning movement to prevent cold injuries. Delays were dangerous. The longer soldiers lingered in camp after sunrise, the more the cold seemed to settle into bones and joints, making the day harder before it even began. You pull your pack into place, feeling its familiar weight. It presses against your damp clothing, which has stiffened overnight. Leather straps creak softly as you adjust them. Boots feel rigid, reluctant to bend. You walk a few short steps just to loosen them, grimacing as your feet complain. Someone calls out an order, not shouted. Shouting wastes energy. The line begins to form uneven and slow. Breath clouds rise together, hanging briefly in the air before thinning out. There is disagreement among modern interpreters of medieval warfare about how far armies could realistically march in winter. Some suggest distances were drastically reduced. Others point to records of surprisingly long movements when conditions demanded it. What matters now is that you're expected to move regardless of the numbers. You fall into step boots crunching against frozen ground. Snow squeaks underfoot, a dry, brittle sound. With each step, warmth builds slowly in your legs, then spreads upward. Your toes sting as circulation returns, a sharp reminder that numbness had settled in deeper than you thought. An unusual trick mentioned in scattered sources involves soldiers deliberately swinging their arms wider than usual while marching in winter. The exaggerated motion increased blood flow to the hands and shoulders. It looked awkward, but it helped, and you catch yourself doing it now without thinking. The rhythm of marching becomes hypnotic. Step, breath, step, breath. The world narrows to the space ahead of you and the sound of many feet moving together. Conversation fades. Everyone saves breath. Cold air fills your lungs, crisp and clean, almost painful. Your chest burns slightly, but you welcome it. It means you are alive and moving. The sun creeps upward, pale and distant, offering light but little heat. Shadows stretch long across the snow. You can feel warmth on your face for a moment when you turn toward it, then it vanishes again. As miles pass, your body settles into a fragile balance. Too slow and you chill. Too fast and sweat builds, threatening another cycle of damp misery. You adjust instinctively, guided by discomfort more than instruction. Marching in winter is not about speed. It is about maintaining just enough motion to keep the cold from winning. And as you move forward with the others, breath-steady muscles burning gently, you understand that survival often depends on doing the simplest thing at exactly the right pace. As the march continues, the cold begins to leave its marks in quieter, more dangerous ways. It is not always dramatic. It does not announce itself with pain right away. Instead, it settles in slowly numbing fingers, toes, ears and noses until sensation fades and concern follows. You rub your hands together, feeling friction spark life back into them. The skin is tight, pale and slightly waxy. You recognize the warning signs, even if you do not know the words for them. Cold injury is familiar in this world, even if it is not fully understood. Medical texts from the medieval period describe winter injuries in broad, often confusing terms. Cold was believed to thicken bodily fluids and slow circulation, leading to numbness and decay. While the explanations were flawed, the observations themselves were accurate. Cold could maim without bloodshed. You glance at the man ahead of you, noticing how his fingers move stiffly on the reins. Someone else walks with an uneven gait, favouring one foot. These are not wounds of battle, but they're just as serious. There is lingering uncertainty among historians about how often frostbite occurred during medieval campaigns, versus other cold-related conditions. Records rarely distinguish, clearly lumping many injuries together under vague descriptions. What is clear is that winter took a heavy toll. A peculiar treatment appears in some accounts. Affected limbs were sometimes rubbed with snow or cold water before being warmed. The idea was to ease the transition and prevent damage. Whether this helped or harmed likely depended on circumstance, but the practice persisted. You flex your toes inside stiff boots, grateful that you can still feel them even if the sensation is dull. Pain when it comes is sharp and unwelcome, but numbness is worse. Numbness hides danger. Someone stumbles briefly ahead, catching themselves before falling. A few hands reach out automatically, steadying them. No one comments. Everyone knows how easily a small mistake can become serious in these conditions. The wind picks up slightly, slicing through gaps in clothing. You pull your hood tighter, tucking your chin down. Ears ache, cheeks sting. Every exposed patch of skin feels targeted. You remember advice passed quietly among soldiers. Keep moving. Do not ignore numbness. Do not rush warmth. Simple rules learned the hard way. As the march continues, you become more attentive to your body, checking in constantly. Wiggle fingers. Stamp feet. Adjust pace. Survival becomes a series of small corrections. The landscape rolls by in muted colours. White. Grey. Brown. Life feels paused, waiting for warmth to return to the world. Until then, you and the others move through it, carefully carrying the knowledge that winter is not just uncomfortable. It is quietly, patiently dangerous. By midday, the march slows not because the cold has eased, but because the animals begin to show it. Horses breathe harder now, nostrils rimed with frost flanks heaving beneath winter coats that were never meant for endless exposure. You watch them carefully because their condition mirrors your own more than you like to admit. A medieval army moves only as well as its animals. Horses carry riders, pull carts, transport supplies. When they struggle, everything slows. You notice how handlers adjust straps and blankets, rubbing stiff necks, murmuring softly. There is a practical tenderness in these gestures. No horse means no army. The ground is harder here, frozen solid beneath a thin crust of snow. Hooves strike it with sharp, echoing sounds. Every step sends small vibrations up your legs. The animals pick their way carefully, heads low, ears flicking back and forth. Some records from the period quietly reveal how winter campaigns caused enormous losses among horses and mules, often exceeding human casualties. Cold-poor fodder and overwork took their toll. You sense that vulnerability now in every laboured breath you hear. You help guide a mule through a narrow patch, feeling its warmth radiate briefly through your gloves. Steam rises from its back when it stops, thick and sweet-smelling. That warmth is tempting. You linger for a moment longer than necessary, then move on. There is uncertainty among historians about how well medieval armies planned animal care for winter operations. Some evidence points to careful provisioning, while other accounts suggest animals were treated as expendable resources. Watching the handlers, now you suspect reality sat somewhere between care and necessity. An odd but practical trick surfaces here. Some soldiers tuck their hands into the thick fur at a horse's neck while resting, stealing warmth for a few precious seconds. It is not kind, but it is effective, and the animals tolerate it with weary patience. The smell of animals grows stronger as the day goes on. Hay, sweat, leather. Manure frozen into hard shapes on the ground. It is not pleasant, but it is familiar. Life on campaign smells like this, especially in winter. As the march resumes, you feel how the rhythm changes. Steps shorten, pace steadies. Everyone adapts to the animals, not the other way around. There is no rushing now. Rushing would break something important. You think briefly about how different this would feel without animals. Every load heavier, every mile longer. Winter would be nearly impossible. The thought fades as you refocus on the path ahead. When the column halts again, you stand near a horse soaking in its heat without thinking about it. Warmth is warmth no matter the source. As the day drags on, you realize that surviving winter campaigns depends not just on human endurance, but on the fragile partnership between people and animals, both enduring the same cold step by careful step. As the afternoon light thins and begins its slow slide toward evening, you start to notice how decisions made far from the cold shape everything you are feeling now. Orders passed down through ranks, plans sketched out in warmer rooms all arrive here, stripped of comfort and tested by winter itself. You hear quiet grumbling as the column halts again. Not anger exactly, more a tired resignation. Every stop risks losing hard-won warmth, yet marching endlessly is not possible either. Someone higher up weighs these choices constantly, even if you never see them. Written directives from medieval commanders show a clear awareness that winter demanded different pacing, shorter marches, more frequent halts, earlier camps. These adjustments were not kindness, they were necessity. Armies that ignored them did not last long. You picture those leaders now cloaked and mounted, feeling the cold less sharply than you do yet still bound by it. Their horses steam, their gloves are thicker, their cloaks heavier. Even so, they cannot escape winter entirely. Cold does not respect rank. There is no single answer agreed upon by historians when it comes to how much foresight medieval commanders truly had regarding winter hardships. Some campaigns appear carefully planned, while others read like desperate improvisations. Standing here, you sense that plans often change with the weather. An interesting habit noted in some winter campaigns involved leaders personally inspecting campsites before nightfall, testing wind direction and ground firmness themselves. It was one of the few moments when command visibly intersected with survival, rather than strategy alone. You watch officers confer briefly, heads close together, voices low. Gestures point toward a tree line ahead, a shallow dip in the land. Decisions are made quickly. There is no time for perfection. As you move toward the chosen site, you feel a flicker of relief. Trees mean less wind, slightly softer ground, small advantages but real ones. Commands ripple backward through the line. Set up here, gather wood, keep close. Routine takes over again, steady and familiar. You realize that leadership in winter is quieter than in battle. There are no stirring speeches, no grand gestures, just a series of practical choices that determine whether you shiver through the night or suffer worse. As the camp begins to form once more, you understand that survival during medieval winter campaigns depended as much on cautious decision-making as on strength or courage. The cold punishes mistakes quickly, and mercy rarely arrives in time. Night falls again, faster than you expect, and with it comes a particular kind of duty that feels heavier in winter than any other time. Watch, guard, standing still while the world freezes around you. Your name is called softly, and you rise with a sigh you do not bother to hide. You take your place at the edge of the camp where the firelight fades and darkness thickens. The ground here is even colder, untouched by bodies or embers. You plant your feet, carefully feeling the chill creep upward almost immediately. Accounts from medieval campaigns mention night watches as a constant strain, but winter transformed them into endurance tests. Standing motionless, drained heat faster than any march. Guards were rotated more frequently in cold weather, not out of generosity, but because frozen sentries were useless. You grip your weapon, feeling the familiar shape through gloves that offer little protection now. Your fingers stiffen quickly. You flex them subtly, keeping blood moving without making noise. Sound carries strangely in cold air. Every scrape feels louder than it should. The night feels alive here. Wind whispers through branches. Snow shifts softly under its own weight. In the distance, something cracks sharply. A tree limb giving way. Your heart jumps anyway. Vigilance costs energy you do not have to spare. There is lingering uncertainty among those who study medieval warfare about how effective winter watches truly were. Darkness cold and fatigue dulled senses. Yet abandoning watch entirely was unthinkable. The risk of surprise was too great. A small but telling practice appears in scattered descriptions. Guards sometimes stamp their feet in slow, deliberate patterns, not to warm themselves fully but to maintain feeling without breaking discipline. You do the same now, rhythm quiet and controlled. Your breath fogs the air, clouds rising and dissolving. You turn your head slightly, careful not to breathe too visibly toward the darkness. Even breath feels like something to manage. Time stretches. Minutes feel long. Your shoulders hunch against the cold. The warmth of the camp behind you feels distant, almost imagined. At last, a soft signal reaches you. Relief. You hand off your place without ceremony and move quickly back toward the fire stiffness, making each step awkward. As warmth returns, slowly, painfully, you realize that standing watch in a medieval winter was not about spotting enemies. It was about enduring stillness without surrendering to cold, and tonight you have endured just enough. When the watch ends and the camp settles again, you notice how quickly everyone begins shaping the night to their advantage. There are no proper shelters waiting, no neat rows of tents. Instead, you work with what the land offers, guided by habit and quiet observation. You help drag fallen branches closer together, stacking them into a low wall that breaks the wind. It is not much, but even a small barrier changes how the cold behaves. Air slows, sound softens. The space behind it feels less exposed. Someone else piles earth and snow along the base, packing it down with boots. The ground is hard, but persistence pays off. You feel the difference immediately when you crouch behind it. The biting edge of the wind dulls, replaced by something more manageable. People have been doing this for generations. Long before formal camps, before standardized equipment, soldiers learned to read landscapes quickly. A dip in the ground, a stand of trees, a rock outcrop. None of it looks like shelter at first glance, but together it becomes enough. You add your cloak to the wall, draping it over branches to trap air. It feels risky exposing yourself like that, but the trade is worth it. Less wind means less heat lost. You pull your tunic tighter and settle into the protected space. Nearby, someone digs a shallow hollow with the heel of their boot, scraping away snow to reach earth beneath. The bare ground radiates cold, but it is steadier than snow that shifts and melts. You copy the motion, creating a shallow nest for yourself. There is a quiet uncertainty that hangs over these efforts. No one truly knows which small choices matter most. You try things because they worked once, or because someone older showed you, or because doing something feels better than doing nothing. A faint scent of crushed pine rises as branches are broken and arranged. It cuts through smoke and wool sharp and clean. For a moment it almost feels refreshing. You sit back and test the space. The difference is subtle but real. Your face still aches with cold, but your back no longer feels flayed by wind. Your breathing slows. Around you, similar pockets of shelter form. Low walls, leaning packs, cloaks tied between sticks. Nothing impressive, everything temporary. By morning it will all be abandoned without a second thought. You realize that winter survival here is built on improvisation. No single solution. Just many small adjustments layered together until the night becomes tolerable. As the fire burns lower and people settle into their places, you tuck yourself into the hollow you have made grateful for the fragile shelter. It will not keep you warm, not really, but it gives you a fighting chance to rest, and in this place that is enough. As the night deepens, you begin to notice subtle differences among the people around you. Not everyone reacts to the cold in the same way. Some seem almost at ease, moving with calm efficiency, while others struggle more visibly, shoulders hunched, hands constantly rubbing together. Geography has shaped them long before this campaign ever began. Those from colder regions move differently. They are quieter about discomfort, more deliberate with their layers, quicker to seek shelter before the wind strengthens. You watch one man adjust his clothing with practiced motions, tightening seams, overlapping fabric, just so. Nothing wasted, nothing rushed. Others carry habits from milder lands. They rely more on fire, linger longer in open spaces, underestimate how quickly cold can turn from nuisance to danger. You see them learn quickly, copying what works, abandoning what does not. There is no clear line between north and south, here are only patterns shaped by experience. Someone from a mountain village understands wind better than someone raised by the coast. A man who has slept in barns through harsh winters adapts faster than one used to stone walls. You feel your own habits shifting. What seemed uncomfortable days ago now feels necessary. You tuck your chin automatically. You turn your body to shield yourself without thinking. Cold rewrites instinct. Among the quieter conversations you hear fragments of comparison. Winter's worse than this one. Campaigns where snow buried tents overnight. Places where rivers froze solid enough to carry wagons. Stories serve a purpose. They teach without lecturing. There is uncertainty woven into these differences. No one can say for sure which habits matter most. Is it the thickness of wool, the way you sleep, the pace you keep while marching? Survival feels like a combination of all of it mixed with luck. A small habit catches your attention. Someone from the far north rubs fat into the seams of his boots before settling down. The leather darkens and softens slightly, shedding moisture better by morning. You file the idea away. The fire burns low now and most movement has slowed. Bodies curl inward. Breathing deepens. The camp looks different depending on where you stand. Sheltered pockets feel almost calm. Exposed edges feel harsh and restless. You realize that medieval winter survival was never uniform. It depended on where you came from, what you learned early, and how quickly you adapted when old habits failed. As you settle back into your space, you feel a quiet respect for those whose lives prepared them for nights like this. Experience does not remove suffering, but it teaches you how to carry it. The camp grows quieter now, but silence does not mean peace. In the stillness, thoughts grow louder, and with them come fears that daylight usually keeps at bay. You find yourself listening to sounds that would go unnoticed in warmer seasons. A distant crack, a shifting shadow, the whisper of wind through bare branches. Many soldiers turn inward at times like this, reaching for something familiar that offers comfort when the body cannot find it. You see lips moving in the dark, prayers murmured softly. Some are formal, learned long ago. Others are improvised, whispered straight into the cold. Small objects emerge from pockets. A carved token. A scrap of cloth tied with string. Something carried not for usefulness, but for reassurance. You finger something of your own, worn smooth by habit, and feel steadier for it. Belief takes many forms here. Some trust in saints, some in luck, some in routines that feel almost ritualistic. Touch the ground before lying down, face a certain direction while sleeping, repeat the same motions each night. In a world where so much is uncertain, patterns create a sense of control. There is quiet disagreement even among those who believe. Which prayers matter? Which signs to heed? Which omens to ignore? No one settles these questions here. Everyone chooses what helps them endure. A peculiar custom surfaces briefly. Someone traces a small mark in the snow near their sleeping place, then smooths it away. It is done without comment, but with care. You do not ask. Some things are not meant to be explained. The fire dims further, glowing softly like a living thing at rest. Shadows stretch long and thin. The camp feels smaller, wrapped tightly against the night. You notice how fear shifts in winter. It is less about sudden violence and more about quiet failure. Not waking, not feeling your fingers, not noticing danger until it is too late. Faith in whatever form pushes back against that fear. As you close your eyes, you listen to the soft chorus of breathing around you. It is steady, human, real. That sound becomes its own kind of comfort. In this place, belief is not about answers. It is about endurance, about giving the mind something warm to hold when the world offers nothing but cold. The night feels longer now, stretched thin and tense. Even wrapped in shared warmth and routine, you sense how fragile everything is. Winter does not need an enemy to create danger, it supplies its own. You lie awake longer than you want listening. Somewhere beyond the faint glow of the fire, the world shifts and settles. Snow slides from a branch. Ice cracks along a frozen stream. Each sound carries weight, pulling your attention outward. Illness moves quietly in places like this. Coughs echo softly. Someone shivers harder than the rest. Another breathes shallow and fast. No one says much about it, but everyone notices. Cold weakens the body in ways that do not announce themselves. There are stories passed in low voices about men who simply did not wake up after nights like this. No wounds, no struggle, just stillness. Whether these tales are warnings or exaggerations hardly matters. They shape behavior all the same. You keep shifting your position, careful not to let numbness settle too deeply. Movement is subtle now, a flex of toes, a roll of shoulders, just enough to remind your body it is still needed. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs and curses softly under their breath. Another offers a bit of cloth, a gesture small but meaningful. Care happens quietly here without ceremony. Fear takes a different shape in winter. It is not sudden or loud. It is patient. It waits for inattention, for fatigue. For the moment you stop checking your hands or forget to adjust your cloak, you think about the enemy wherever they might be. They are out in this same cold, facing the same night. That knowledge brings a strange comfort. Winter is impartial. It presses down on everyone equally. A faint sound breaks the stillness. A rustle, then nothing. You tense, heart quickening, then relax again. Probably an animal. Probably. The uncertainty lingers longer than the sound itself. As hours pass, the camp breathes together a slow rhythm of inhalation and exhalation. The fire pulses dimly. Embers glow and fade. You realize that survival here is not about bravery. It is about attention. About noticing small changes before they grow large. About respecting the quiet threats that come with cold and darkness. Eventually exhaustion softens your thoughts. Fear dulls. Muscles loosen. You drift still listening, but no longer alert in the same way. The night remains watchful and cold. But for now you are still here within it. When morning comes again, it does not bring relief so much as repetition. The same cold, the same stiffness. But now the landscape changes. You're no longer simply passing through winter, you're stopping inside it. The army slows, then halts altogether, spreading out before walls that rise pale and silent against the sky. A siege in winter feels different from marching. Movement kept you warm. Stillness drains you. Days stretch longer when you're waiting instead of advancing. You look up at stone that does not care how cold you are. The walls stand unchanged, indifferent to weather and time. People begin carving routines into the frozen days, paths between fires, places to relieve yourself, corners where the wind is slightly kinder. The camp hardens into something semi-permanent, though everyone knows it will never feel secure. Food becomes more predictable and more monotonous. Supplies move slowly in winter if they move at all. Portions are measured carefully now. Hunger becomes a background companion, never loud, always present. You hear stories about other winter sieges. Months spent staring at walls while snow-buried tents and froze moats solid. There is no agreement in those stories about whether winter favours attacker or defender. Cold punishes both, but in different ways. Inside the walls you imagine people huddled around hearths rationing food, watching the same sky. The thought is strangely comforting. This misery is shared even if unequally. A small detail catches your attention. Some soldiers begin stacking stones near their sleeping places, not for building, but to block drafts and trap warmth. Stone holds cold, but it also slows wind. Everything here is about trade-offs. The days blur together. You mark time by fire tending guard shifts and meals. Sleep comes and goes without clear boundaries. Your body adapts, lowering expectations, conserving energy. You notice morale changing, not dramatically, just a quiet thinning. Jokes fade, conversations shorten. Winter sieges wear people down without spectacle. Yet there is also a strange steadiness that develops. Routine becomes armor, predictability becomes comfort. Knowing what comes next matters when everything else feels hostile. As you sit near the fire, staring at unmoving walls, you understand that winter warfare is as much about waiting as fighting. And waiting in the cold can be the hardest battle of all. As the siege drags on, something unexpected begins to matter more than food or fire. Sound, or rather the lack of it. Long winter nights stretch endlessly when they're silent, and silence gives the cold too much room to speak. So people fill it gently, carefully. Someone hums, barely audible at first, a simple tune looping without a clear beginning or end. It drifts through the camp like breath unnoticed until it stops and you miss it. Others add quiet sounds of their own, a murmured rhyme, a half-remembered song from childhood. Nothing loud, nothing that would carry far. You find yourself listening more than participating. The rhythm steadies you. It gives shape to time, breaking the night into something manageable. Verse follows verse. Repetition becomes soothing rather than dull. Stories surface too, though they are shorter now. No long epics, just fragments. A funny moment from a past campaign. A familiar character exaggerated slightly with each telling. Laughter comes quietly, quickly cut short, but it still warms something inside. Winter camps have always relied on this. When movement stops and darkness takes over, voices become tools. Not for command or warning, but for keeping spirits from sinking too far. You feel the difference when the sounds begin and when they fade. There is a subtle disagreement among the men about what helps most. Some prefer silence, conserving energy and focus. Others need sound to keep their thoughts from turning inward. No one forces either approach. Everyone copes in their own way. A small habit catches your attention. Someone tells the same story each night, word for word, refusing to change it. At first it seems odd, then comforting. Predictability becomes its own kind of warmth. You notice how voices sound different in the cold, sharper, thinner. Words feel fragile, as if they might shatter if spoken too loudly. Everyone adjusts instinctively, lowering volume, shortening sentences. As the fire burns low, the sounds thin out. Humming fades into breathing. Stories trail off mid-sentence. Sleep creeps in quietly, encouraged by familiarity rather than comfort. You close your eyes, letting the last murmurs wash over you. In winter, morale does not rise with grand speeches. It survives in whispers, in shared jokes, in the simple reminder that others are awake with you in the dark. And as the night deepens once more, you understand that medieval soldiers did not just fight cold with fire and food. They fought it with voices, keeping the darkness from feeling too empty. As the days wear on, the camp develops a smell that never quite leaves. Winter sharpens it instead of hiding it. Smoke clings to everything first, soaking into wool, hair, and skin until it becomes part of you. Even when the fire burns low, its presence lingers in your nose and throat. Then there are the animals, horses, mules, and the remains of their feed. Hay damp with frost. Leather tack stiffened by cold and sweat. Manure freezes where it falls, preserving its scent far longer than it ever would in summer. You step carefully, learning where not to walk by memory alone. Human bodies add their own layers. Sweat trapped beneath wool. Breath turned sour by fatigue and poor sleep. Clothes worn too long without washing. In warmer seasons, rain and sun might soften these smells. Winter locks them in place. You notice how quickly you stop reacting to it all. What once felt overwhelming fades into background. Only changes stand out now. Fresh smoke, blood from a cut finger, the sharp, almost sweet smell of pine when someone breaks branches for shelter. There is a quiet understanding that washing is dangerous now. Exposed skin chills too fast. wet hair freezes, so cleanliness becomes selective. Hands wiped on snow, faces rubbed with cloth. Anything more feels risky. Someone nearby burns a scrap of resinous wood, and for a moment the air smells almost pleasant. It reminds you of forests untouched by camps and war. The feeling passes quickly, but you hold on to it longer than you expect. Food smells carry far in winter air. A pot warming over embers draws people closer without a word spoken. The scent of fat and salt feels heavier than hunger settling deep in your chest. Even illness announces itself by smell. A cough carries something sour. A wound smells wrong before it looks wrong. You learn to notice these things without thinking about them too much. As night falls again, the smells settle into a familiar mix. Smoke, wool, cold earth, animals, people. It becomes the scent of survival itself. You pull your cloak tighter and breathe slowly through your nose, letting the air warm slightly before reaching your lungs. The smell is no longer unpleasant. It is simply where you are. And as sleep approaches, you realize that winter camps are remembered not just by sights and sounds, but by smells that follow you long after the cold has faded. Sleep comes differently now, not as something you fall into, but as something that drifts near you, pauses, then settles only if you stay still enough. You lie curled in your place, listening to the camp breathe, feeling the ground press up through layers that no longer feel like protection, just familiarity. Your body knows this routine. Muscles loosen in stages, first the legs, then the back. Your hands unclench, last fingers reluctant to let go of tension they have carried all day. Cold still nips at exposed skin, but exhaustion dulls its teeth. Dreams arrive thin and fragmented. You drift into them and out again without clear borders. A memory of warmth, a sound from home, the imagined creak of a door opening somewhere safe. Each time the cold pulls you back before the image can fully form. Someone nearby shifts in their sleep, pressing closer without waking. You adjust instinctively, making room, sharing warmth without thought. The movement is slow and practiced, like turning over under heavy blankets that do not exist. Breathing becomes your anchor. Slow, shallow. You learn not to inhale too deeply. Cold air burns if you do. Instead, you sip it carefully, letting it warm before reaching your chest. Each breath feels deliberate, counted without numbers. The fire has faded to embers now. Its glow is just enough to shape shadows, not enough to promise warmth. Still it marks time. As long as something glows, the night has not fully claimed the camp. You wake briefly to the sound of footsteps, a guard passing quietly, the scrape of leather. Then silence again. Your eyes open, then close without resistance. You do not check the sky. You trust the rhythm instead. There is a moment when your body feels almost comfortable. Not warm, not rested, but balanced. Pain softens, cold recedes slightly. This is the closest thing to rest you will get out here, and you take it without questioning. Sleep deepens for a while, long enough that time blurs, long enough that you forget where you are just for a breath or two. Then a shiver runs through you, sharp and sudden, dragging you back. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, tucking fabric under your chin. The motion feels automatic, learned through repetition rather than thought. You've done this dozens of times now. Nearby someone murmurs in their sleep, a name, a place. The words dissolve before meaning forms. Dreams spill out and vanish into the cold air. Your own thoughts slow again. Edges soften. The camp fades into sensation rather than detail. Weight, breath, pressure. Warmth that comes and goes. You realize that sleeping in a medieval winter camp is less about rest and more about survival through stillness. You conserve energy by not moving. You accept discomfort instead of fighting it. You let the night pass through you rather than trying to escape it. As sleep finally settles again, shallow but steady, you float in that narrow space between waking and dreaming. The cold is still there. The ground is still hard. But for now you are carried by exhaustion, and that is enough to keep you until morning. Morning arrives quietly without ceremony, and the first thing you feel is pain. Not sharp, not sudden, but deep and everywhere. Your body has cooled into the shapes it held through the night, and now it resists returning to motion. You open your eyes to pale light and frost clinging to everything that did not move. You try to sit up and pause halfway, waiting for the stiffness to ease. Fingers tingle as sensation returns in uneven waves. Toes ache inside boots that feel a size too small. Your breath fogs the air again, thick and slow, as if even breathing needs warming up. Around you, others rise in stages, unfolding carefully, each person negotiating with their own body. No one jumps to their feet. Those who try regret it quickly. A man nearby mutters softly as he straightens, one hand pressed into his lower back. The ground sparkles faintly where frost has settled overnight. Cloaks are edged with white. Hair crunches when brushed aside. Even eyelashes feel heavy. Winter has left its signature everywhere. You stamp your feet gently, then harder, encouraging blood to move. Pain flares sharp and bright, then dulls into something manageable. Movement hurts, but not moving hurts more. You choose the pain that leads somewhere. Someone rekindles the fire, coaxing embers back into flame. Smoke rises in a thin column before flattening in the cold air. You inch closer, holding your hands out again, repeating motions you could perform in your sleep now. The first warmth of the day always feels like a promise, even though you know better. It will fade. Everything fades out here. Still, you accept it gratefully. Your stomach growls, quietly reminding you that yesterday's food is long gone. Cold burns through reserves quickly. You reach for whatever remains of your rations, chewing slowly, letting the simple act of eating ground you. As the camp stirs, sounds return. Coughs, low voices, the scrape of metal and leather. Life resumes its careful rhythm. No one lingers longer than necessary. Standing still invites cold back in. You glance at your hands again, checking colour and movement. Pale, but responsive. Good enough. You flex them repeatedly, building warmth through repetition rather than hope. Morning in a winter campaign is not a beginning. It is a continuation. The night has passed, but its effects remain etched into muscles and joints. You carry them with you as you pack adjust straps and prepare to move again. As the sun lifts higher, offering light without comfort, you take one last look at the place where you slept. By evening it will feel distant, just another frozen patch of ground left behind. You fall into step with the others, body loosening gradually, breath steadying. The cold retreats slightly as movement takes over. Not gone, never gone, just held at bay. Another day begins, marked not by hope, but by persistence. And for now, persistence is enough. As the march carries on through villages and open land, you begin to notice something that feels quietly unsettling. The people who live here do not always look warmer than you do. In fact, some look worse. You pass farmhouses with thin smoke drifting from chimneys, fields locked under frost, and faces watching from doorways with the same guarded expressions you see in camp. You would imagine civilians tucked safely indoors, protected from the worst of winter. The reality is more complicated. Many peasants spend their days outside, even now tending animals, hauling water, breaking ice. Their clothing is worn thinner than yours, in places patched, endlessly softened by years of use. You catch the eye of an older man standing near a fence, his breath rising just like yours. He does not look surprised by the cold. He looks resigned to it. This is his season too. There is a strange reversal here. You, a soldier, carry weapons, rations, and the collective warmth of an army. They rely on stores that may or may not last until spring. You move on, they stay. As the column passes, children stare openly. Some wave, others just watch. Their faces are red from cold noses, running hands tucked into sleeves. You feel a brief, unexpected pang. This campaign will end for you one way or another. Winter for them simply continues. You hear murmurs among the men about how peasants survive winters year after year without marching or fighting. The answers are vague: habit, preparation, luck. No one sounds certain. A small detail catches your attention. In one yard, strips of cloth hang stiffly from a line frozen in place. Even here people try to dry clothing when they can seizing brief moments of sun or wind. The struggle looks familiar. As you move on, the landscape empties again. Fields stretch white and quiet. The army's noise fades back into its usual rhythm. Boots crunch. Breath clouds rise and vanish. You realize that winter does not care whether you wear armor or carry a plough. It presses on everyone differently but relentlessly. Soldiers may suffer intensely for a season. Civilians endure it every year. That thought stays with you longer than expected. It softens complaints. It reframes discomfort. Not because things are easier, but because you see them differently now. As night approaches again, you prepare to repeat the same routines. Fire, food, shelter, sleep. But somewhere behind you, others will face the same cold without moving on. You settle back into step body, tired but steady. Winter belongs to no one. It simply waits, and everyone learns to live inside it as best they can. By now, the idea of winter warfare has lost its shine completely. Whatever stories you once heard about frozen battles and dramatic snow-covered charges feel distant and false. Out here, winter is not cinematic. It is slow, exhausting, and deeply repetitive. You overhear someone mention how people back home imagine campaigns like this. Brave men standing firm against snowstorms, camps glowing warmly against white fields. You almost laugh. The truth is quieter, colder, far less heroic. Most days pass without combat at all. Instead, you fight stiffness, hunger, boredom, and the constant calculation of how to stay warm without wasting energy. Winter does not need swords to wear an army down. It does the work itself. You notice how expectations change. In summer, soldiers complain about long marches and poor food. In winter, those complaints fade. Survival becomes the standard. Anything beyond that feels like a gift. There is talk around the fire about famous winter campaigns from the past. Stories blur together. Some say certain leaders thrived in the cold using snow and ice as allies. Others quietly doubt those tales, pointing out how many never returned from such efforts. No one settles the matter. Stories serve morale more than accuracy. A small contradiction stands out. Some men insist winter makes soldiers tougher. Others whisper that it simply breaks them more slowly. Watching faces around the fire, you suspect both can be true. You adjust your cloak and realize how much your own thinking has shifted. You no longer imagine winter as an obstacle to overcome. It is simply the environment you exist in now, shaping every decision whether you like it or not. The routines that once felt miserable now feel grounding. Fire tending, checking feet, eating slowly, curling inward at night. These habits replace larger hopes and plans. They are enough. As the night deepens again, you stop expecting relief. That expectation used to drain you. Now acceptance brings a strange calm. You are here. The cold is here. Both facts coexist without drama. You lie back staring at stars that feel sharp and distant. Winter warfare, you realize, is not about bold action. It is about endurance that leaves few marks anyone will remember. And as sleep edges closer, you understand why so many myths grow around campaigns like this. The truth is too quiet, too uncomfortable, and too human to make good stories. Time moves differently now, measured less in days and more in small improvements that barely register unless you pay attention. You notice them anyway. A better way to wrap your cloak so it blocks wind without slipping. A rhythm to marching that keeps sweat from building. The quiet knowledge of when to stop adjusting and conserve energy instead. None of this feels like progress in the usual sense. There are no breakthroughs, just accumulation. What worked once is repeated. What failed is quietly abandoned. Winter becomes a teacher that never speaks, only corrects. You remember earlier nights when the cold felt overwhelming, unpredictable. Now it feels familiar, still dangerous, still uncomfortable, but no longer surprising. You recognize its moods. The sharper bite before dawn, the brief mercy of midday light, the way wind changes everything. You watch others adapt too. Movements grow economical, gestures shrink, conversations shorten. People learn how to exist inside layers without fighting them. Even complaints sound different, more reflective than angry. You hear someone remark that soldiers centuries ago did not know how to prepare for winters like this. Another shrugs and says people always learn eventually if they survive long enough. Neither statement feels complete. Preparation and adaptation blur together out here. A small improvement stands out. Someone has learned to pack snow tightly against a cloak wall, sealing gaps where wind used to creep in. The difference is noticeable enough that others copy it the next night. Knowledge spreads quietly without credit. You adjust your own habits again, shifting how you sleep so your feet stay warmer, even if your shoulders suffer more. Trade-offs feel natural now. You stop searching for perfect solutions. As days stack up, you realize that winter campaigns force changes slowly across years and generations. What you learn now will be carried into the next cold season, then refined again. Survival knowledge does not arrive fully formed, it evolves. The fire burns low beside you, steady and reliable. You tend it almost without thinking. Hands move on their own, guided by memory rather than instruction. You lie back and let your eyes close, body settling into a posture shaped by weeks of cold. You're not comfortable, but you are adapted, and that you understand now is what keeps people alive through winters like this. The cold has been teaching you for weeks now, and you begin to sense the lessons settling deeper than muscle memory. They slip into the way you think, the way you judge risk, the way you measure effort. Winter strips choices down to their simplest forms, and in doing so, it leaves marks that last long after the frost melts. You notice how patience has grown quietly inside you. Rushing no longer appeals. Quick movements invite sweat. Sweat invites cold. Everything now is done with intention, each action weighed against its cost. Even standing up feels like a decision that deserves a pause. You listen differently too. The sound of wind in branches tells you where to sleep. The tone of someone's cough hints at trouble before words ever do. The crackle of a fire reveals how long it will last without tending. Your senses have sharpened not out of curiosity but necessity. Someone nearby remarks that winter makes people honest. You think about that for a moment. Cold removes pretenses. No one boasts here. No one pretends to be unaffected. Strength shows itself quietly in small consistencies, not in bold claims. You remember earlier discomforts that once felt unbearable. Sleeping on frozen ground, wearing damp clothes, waking stiff and aching. None of it has vanished, but your reaction has changed. Endurance now feels less like resistance and more like cooperation. The land itself seems altered by winter, not just covered but simplified. Paths are clearer, distractions fewer. Even the sky feels closer, somehow heavy and watchful. You move through this pared-down world with a focus that surprises you. You think about what will be remembered from campaigns like this, not by those who endure them, but by those who hear about them later. Details will blur, hardships will compress into neat phrases, the reality will soften with time. Here in the middle of it there is no neatness, just accumulation. Day layered onto day, cold layered onto cold, lessons layered quietly onto the people who survive. You settle near the fire again, body folding into a shape that feels almost natural now. Your breath slows. The night does not feel friendly, but it feels familiar. As sleep edges closer, you understand that winter warfare did more than test medieval soldiers. It reshaped how they thought about effort risk and survival itself. Those lessons lingered long after the snow was gone, carried forward into future seasons, future campaigns, future lives. You close your eyes, letting the fire glow fade behind your lids. The cold remains, but so do you. The days begin to blur together now, and with them the sharp edges of memory soften. What once felt overwhelming has been worn smooth by repetition. Winter no longer surprises you. that simply exists like a low constant note beneath everything else. You notice how people speak about the cold differently, not with frustration anymore, but with a kind of shorthand, a glance at the sky, a nod toward the wind. Everyone understands what that means. Words feel unnecessary. Stories start drifting toward the past. Not the distant past of kings and battles, but recent memories already gaining a strange glow. Someone recalls the first night of the campaign when the cold felt unbearable. Another laughs quietly at how badly they wrapped their cloak back then. The memory feels unreal now, as if it happened to someone else. You realize how quickly suffering turns into narrative. Hardship becomes something you describe rather than endure, even while it is still happening, especially while it is still happening. This is how people carry experiences like this forward without breaking. Around the fire, faces look older, not dramatically but subtly. Lines settle in, eyes grow steadier. Winter leaves its mark slowly, not all of them visible. You think about how stories of campaigns are passed along, not in full detail but in fragments. A sentence about a terrible winter, a remark about men lost to cold rather than steel. Most listeners nod and move on. Few imagine the nights themselves. Here inside one of those nights you understand how memory edits reality. It keeps what can be carried and lets the rest fade. The ache in your joints will disappear. The exact sound of frozen ground under boots will not survive long, but the knowledge remains. You adjust your position, easing closer to warmth without thinking about it. Habit has replaced instruction entirely. Your body knows what to do before your mind engages. The fire crackles softly. Sparks lift and vanish. The sky above feels vast and indifferent. Somewhere far beyond this camp, people will someday speak of winters like this in passing, unaware of how deeply they shape the ones who lived through them. You close your eyes, feeling the weight of the night settle gently rather than sharply. You're no longer counting hours, you're simply moving through them. As sleep pulls you under again, you sense how this experience will linger long after it ends. Not as pain, but as quiet understanding. Winter fades, memory fades, but endurance leaves a trace that stays. The cold loosens its grip gradually, almost without asking permission. You notice it first in small ways, the way your breath no longer stings quite as sharply, the way frost retreats from the edges of your cloak instead of clinging stubbornly. Morning light lingers a little longer now, and darkness does not rush in so eagerly. The routines remain, but they soften. Fires feel less desperate. Movement feels easier. Your body still aches, but it no longer feels like it's fighting the world itself. Winter is still present, but it has begun to release you inch by inch. You pack and unpack with familiar motions, aware that this campaign this season is drawing towards something like an ending. Not triumph, not relief, just transition. The cold that once dominated every thought now becomes part of the background, like a sound you stop noticing once it fades. You look around at the others and see the same quiet shift. Faces lift slightly. Conversations stretch a bit longer. Laughter returns tentative but real. No one celebrates. They simply breathe more easily. The landscape changes too. Snow thins, mud replaces ice. The ground softens underfoot. Each step feels less punishing. You do not rush this change. You have learned better than that. As you move forward, you carry the winter with you. Not the cold itself, but the habits it carved into you. Awareness, patience, respect for small comforts. These do not vanish when warmth returns. You realize that medieval soldiers survived winter nights not through a single clever solution, but through layers of endurance built slowly, shared quietly, and remembered long after the cold released its hold. The fire burns behind you, now smaller, less necessary. You walk on body steadier, mind quieter, leaving the hardest nights where they belong, in the past. And as the world slowly warms again, you feel yourself doing the same. The pace eases here. Thoughts stretch out, the images soften. You're no longer standing guard or huddled against the cold. You're simply resting, letting the long night drift away. The ground beneath you feels less hard now, the air gentler. Breathing comes easily without effort or calculation. You allow your shoulders to relax. Your jaw loosens. The tension you carried for so long begins to fade. There's nothing left to prepare for, nothing left to endure. The work is done. You let the final images blur. Firelight dimming, frost melting, footsteps fading into quiet earth. The cold becomes memory, then impression, then nothing at all. Now you can rest, fully, safely. Let the night pass without watching it. Let sleep settle deeply without interruption. Thank you for walking through history with me tonight.